Full disclosure, I'm not going to be showing footage of this episode here. 1, for copyright, but 2, I really think you should experience this one yourself, without my dumbass voice over it. So, honestly, this was just all around a fantastic episode of Rick and Morty for a couple of reasons. So this is Season 7, Episode 5, Unmortricken. Rick and Morty finally work to take down Rick Prime. We all saw the preview last week, looked amazing, and honestly, I think this episode super delivered. This one is where it all goes down. And they did a lot more than I was expecting them to. You know, we've done this song and dance before with Rick and Morty. They show us this grand finale in the trailer, and then it's just like a rug pull, and they don't actually do it. And it's just an episode about how fans expect too much from them, and it's tired at this point. Clever, sure, but it's just disappointing. Because the thing about narcissism is it makes sense short term, right? You try and stretch that shit out for 10 seasons or more, it's just gonna get depressing. They allow themselves to step out of that depressive bubble for an episode and just have fun. Because this is honestly one of the most fun episodes of Rick and Morty ever. This one's not just great cause it's story stuff. I mean, that is a big part. We appreciate the continuity here. I love how this episode just drops everything and lets evil Morty out of the box to work together with our Rick to take down Rick Prime. A concept like that for an episode is something they never do. That is something that is way too much story for them to handle for one episode. But they went for it anyway, and I really appreciate it. Like I said, one of the most fun episodes of Rick and Morty ever. We'll get into the story implications later, but for now, I just want to talk about how freaking awesome it was to watch evil Morty and Rick fight Rick Prime side by side, using both of their technologies. That's how they were able to beat him. Rick Prime could never account for evil Morty and Rick actually putting aside their bullshit and teaming up against him. In that sense, it makes sense that they were actually able to defeat him within this one episode. It's the variable that he could never account for. Seeing evil Morty team up with our Rick was so jarring, but the first half of this episode is watching them escape this box prison thing. And it's really fun to just watch different Ricks fight each other, with the added dynamic of a Morty that acts like a Rick, thrown into the pile. And the dialogue between them felt surprisingly natural, because when the show doesn't limit itself and it just lets itself have fun with a concept, the writing comes to it so much more naturally. Ironically, it's sort of similar to how I've been making new videos. Before, I tried to have all this elaborate shit, like different candles positions and different perspectives of her that I would use in videos, and it always just came off as like so hardworking for so little return. And that's one thing, but also making videos just became not fun anymore. And I realized that I just needed to let the script take over and just go with what I feel in the moment. And I think the content has gotten so much better because of that. And I hope Rick and Morty is headed in the same direction. It feels like they are. It feels like now, since the show has dealt with this Rick Prime stuff already, now it feels like they're open to just come up with new stuff and do whatever they want. They're not bound by stuff they set up 5 seasons ago. It's frightening, but it's also freeing, because now the show can evolve into something that the creators really want, and it's awesome to see. The cold open for this episode was one of the show's greatest, if not its best. We start with who we think is our Rick and Morty. Morty gets into a small argument, he diffuses it, whatever, we've seen that a million times before. But then, Rick gets drunk, and evil Morty finally takes advantage of him. It's so interesting to see what it was that set evil Morty off. It really makes you think if our Morty is just one small argument away from doing the same to our Rick. All it took was that one little argument, and it just became the catalyst for his development. And I love the added callback to Rick being afraid of pirates. Every single episode this season, every single one of them, has dropped little callbacks to previous episodes. Whether it's in Season 5, Season 3, Season 1, Season 2, anything. And it just creates so much of a better balance between everything, and I really appreciate it. I think it makes the show flow much better, and it's much more enjoyable to watch. Then evil Morty goes around, we see his entire backstory, and the music swells. The music, oh my god, it was so perfect. The music swells, fades, and then slams right on the title card. It's just so perfect. And that was the moment I knew this episode was just going to let itself have fun. It can drop the rug pulls and all the narcissism, and it just, I don't know. I know the show has been going through an identity crisis, and maybe it was really painful for them to just drop the stuff they've been doing and give us what the audience wants. You could interpret this as them sort of giving up and saying, fine, we'll just give you all this continuity in one episode, and you'll love it, and then the rest of the show is gonna be whatever, fine. But I don't interpret it like that, and it doesn't have to be like that. This could really open the show up to something new. And even though the show started out as narcissistic, it's evolved into something so much more. We've got this great family dynamic that's always changing, new characters left and right, new fun concepts. The show definitely got bogged down by always getting the same note. Go back to season 2, go back to season 2. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Rick doesn't want to do it. It's clear the creatives don't want to do it. And at this point, the show's fanbase has turned over so much, I don't think we really need to anyway. So this episode, Jumbled Thoughts aside, is doing the best thing it could ever do. It's freeing Rick from the grasp that Rick Prime had on his life, but it's also freeing the audience to just embrace a new show. And I think this creates a much brighter future for seasons 8 through 10. And we're only halfway through season 7. I don't know what the rest of the season is going to be about. Probably just fun one-offs, and I am completely fine with that. The show is starting to prove it can still do those fun one-off adventures. Even if the voices don't completely have them nailed down just yet. Like, I'll be honest, Morty is starting to grate on me. He really is. But I watched 5 seasons of Steven Universe. So really, I think we can all be a little patient. Also, seeing the wider multiverse outside of the central finite curve was so fun. That little Jetsons reference. It's a fun reference where they're all portaling over and killing each other. But it also shows just how chaotic the multiverse is outside of that curve. It is truly a runaway problem. Now that everyone's mastered interdimensional travel, it's crazy to think what's gonna happen. The future of the show and the upping of the stakes is probably going to be Evil Morty. Maybe not Evil Morty specifically, but the stuff that's outside of the curve, giving us one of the largest scales of anything in IPs right now. I mean, this is huge. We're talking about Omniverse level huge here, which is crazy. I also think I might have seen a Galactic Kids Next Door reference. There's a character in the background of One Shot, kind of looks like that character. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but it looks like it. And I noticed it on the first time I watched it, so I think it is. So what I was afraid this episode would do is nerf Rick Prime. I didn't expect for him to fully die in this episode, but somehow they were able to kill him and also make him feel at full power. Which is crazy, right? We've only gotten a handful of episodes with this guy and only one real interaction with him. But he doesn't feel nerfed like at all, which is incredible. By the end, this guy felt like the big threat we've wanted to take down all of this time, even though we kind of just got introduced to him. I think a lot of that has to do with the pacing of this episode. It showed just how ahead Rick Prime is, but it also introduced that new variable of Evil Morty teaming up with Rick, which, again, he would never account for, and that's how they were able to defeat him. Something so simple as Morty and Evil Morty switching clothes while he wasn't looking was the thing that was able to take him down. His own smugness just kind of blinded him to what was happening, and that feels deserved. And it feels right for the thing to finally take him down. We got the gadget fight, and we got all of this crazy action set pieces, and it's awesome that he's finally killed by just Rick beating the absolute shit out of him. This is all of Rick's depression, all his anger being unloaded on this one guy. 7 seasons of pent-up anger right in a sucker punch to the face, and it's awesome. And I think even during this scene, the voice acting became so much more. It felt so real. And it also makes sense that Rick Prime would kill every Diane too. Because it's been asked up to this point, if another Diane existed, why wouldn't Rick just go there? Kind of makes sense that every Diane would be gone. Which is the mark of a great continuity, I guess. To be able to pick out those little details that the audience was kind of thinking about, but not really. It makes sense that Diane would be erased from the entire multiverse, which just makes Rick Prime seem so much worse by comparison. He truly does not give a shit. He was just about to kill our Morty, not for really doing anything, just because he could. So finally, what does this episode mean for the future of the series? Honestly, it's hard to say, but one thing I think is going to happen before the season's end is Jerry. Jerry is finally gonna shine, because think about it, Rick has essentially become Jerry, out of a job, and out of excuses. He has nowhere left to go. No purpose, nothing keeping him going, which is why the final scene of this episode has that sad song. It's such a perfect conclusion, and it points to Rick being kind of directionless from now on. He's definitely going to go through some emotional stuff, and I can't wait to see where it's going. And the after credits scene was also so touching. It was perfect. I thought it was going in a comedic route. The comedic ones don't usually hit for me, but this one pulled the rug out from under us in the best way possible. Slow Mobius's aunt, or whoever, lost her husband and starts to go on the exact same path that Rick was going on. But then she meets someone who's just like her, and they fall in love and combine their families. That could have easily been Rick and another multiverse hopping person, which is so meaningful. It probably doesn't mean that we're going to see these characters ever again, but it does mean that all of this stuff could have been avoided by a simple switch, and it's the perfect bookend to a perfect episode. In the end, guys, I think this was a fantastic episode of Rick and Morty. At this point, Rick and Morty has gone on so long and accumulated so many haters that I know the comments section is going to be filled with complaints of, oh, they killed Rick Prime, I can't believe they did that, I'm going to stop watching the show now. Ugh, this was such an unfunny episode, I hate it. And you know what? Have your opinions, but this was such a goddamn fun episode, it kind of doesn't matter. It was good, clean fun. And now that Rick Prime is dealt with, the writer's room can focus on those funnier one-offs without having the burden of, we gotta go back to Rick Prime and everything has to stay consistent within the Rick Prime storyline. Not anymore. They can do whatever they want, and that is so liberating. So that's my thoughts on the episode. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Remember, keep it constructive. My name is Candles. I'll see you next time.